We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years. We can't take a chance that somebody else takes over Venezuela. We're not going to let that happen. We're there now, and what people don't understand, but they understand as I say this, is we're going to run it essentially until such time as a proper transition can take place.
Today, Nicolás Maduro appeared in a Manhattan federal courthouse to face narco-terrorism charges. You'll see a lot of coverage about the indictment, the charges, what this means for the legal case. That's all background noise. Here's what actually matters. While everyone watches the courtroom drama, Donald Trump just announced that the United States will, quote, run Venezuela, end quote, for an indefinite period. He said American companies will, quote, seize the oil reserves, end quote. He said U.S. troops will provide security for corporate extraction operations, and he threatened Venezuela's remaining officials with consequences bigger than Maduro if they don't comply with American demands for total access to the country's oil infrastructure. This isn't regime change. This is a resource grab backed by military force, conducted without congressional authorization, announced with mafia-style threats, and justified with a transparent lie about drug trafficking. And Trump isn't hiding any of it. He's bragging. Let me show you what's actually happening here, because the language Trump is using reveals something much darker than typical American interventionism. This is what authoritarianism looks like when it's exported abroad. This is what happens when a president believes immunity means impunity. And this is what fascism looks like in foreign policy. Let's start with what Trump is actually saying, because his exact words matter. At Mar-a-Lago on Saturday, Trump announced, quote, we're going to run the country for a period of time, end quote. Not support a transition, not help Venezuelans rebuild, not empower the democratic opposition, run the country. American cabinet officials, plus what he called a, quote, local team, end quote, will govern Venezuela. No timeline specified. No transfer of power planned. U.S. officials will simply run Venezuela until, in Trump's words, quote, a judicious transition can happen. End quote. End quote. When has a judicious transition ever happened under military occupation? Then there's the oil. Trump said multiple times, quote, we're going to seize Venezuela's massive oil reserves, end quote. He's, quote, recruiting American companies to overhaul the gutted industry, end quote. U.S. troops will provide security. American companies will, quote, spend billions, end quote, and, quote, start making money for the country, end quote. He called them, quote, our big, beautiful oil companies, end quote. Whose country exactly will be making money? Because when he says our companies, he means American corporations. When he says making money, he means corporate profits. And when he says seize, he means take by force. This isn't economic partnership. This isn't negotiated access. This is resource extraction colonialism. And Trump is saying it out loud because he thinks honesty about power makes him look strong. Representative Jake Auchincloss, a Massachusetts Democrat, said it plainly on Saturday, quote, this is blood for oil. It's got nothing to do with narco-trafficking. Drugs are mostly going to Europe, and cocaine is not the drug that is killing Americans. That's fentanyl coming from China. This has always been about the fact that Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves. End quote. Venezuela does have the world's largest proven oil reserves. 303 billion barrels, larger than Saudi Arabia. The industry has been gutted by decades of mismanagement, sanctions, and underinvestment. And now Trump is sending in American companies, backed by American troops, to seize it. If this were about drugs, we'd be invading China, where fentanyl comes from. If this were about protecting Americans, we'd be addressing the actual drug crisis, not a Venezuelan cocaine trade that primarily serves European markets. But it's not about drugs. Trump told you what it's about: oil, our companies, making money. Now, let's talk about the threats, because this is where it's really dark. Trump has reportedly told Venezuelan officials, specifically Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, that if she doesn't comply with U.S. demands for total access to oil infrastructure, she'll face consequences, quote, bigger than Maduro, end quote. Think about what that means. Maduro was captured by military force, transported to the United States against his will, and is now facing life in prison. What's bigger than that? The threat doesn't specify, and that's the point. The ambiguity is what makes it work as coercion. You don't know exactly what bigger means, only that it's worse. The uncertainty itself is the weapon. This is mob logic. This is protection racket language. Nice government you've got there. Shame if something happened to it. Do what we say or face consequences. Our companies get access, or you end up worse than the last guy. And Trump is saying this publicly, not even as private diplomatic pressure. He's announcing it because he believes this is how power works. The strong do what they want, the weak comply or get destroyed. And he's the strong one. Now, I want you to notice something about the language Trump is using, because there's been a fundamental shift in how American presidents talk about intervention. Previous presidents, even when conducting illegal or immoral wars, maintained certain rhetorical frameworks. George W. Bush talked about spreading democracy and removing weapons of mass destruction. Barack Obama talked about humanitarian intervention and responsibility to protect. Bill Clinton talked about stopping genocide in Kosovo. Ronald Reagan talked about supporting freedom fighters. Even when these justifications were lies or pretexts, they were offered. There was a pretense that American power served some higher purpose, beyond raw national interest. Trump has dropped that entirely. He's not saying we're liberating the Venezuelan people. He's not claiming humanitarian crisis. He's not talking about restoring constitutional order or supporting democratic transition. He's saying we're going to run the country, seize the oil, make our companies rich, and if you don't like it, the consequences will be bigger than what happened to Maduro. This is the shift from justification to assertion. From we had to invade because of this threat to we invaded and now we're in charge. From we'll help you rebuild to we're taking your resources. From supporting democracy to installing American governors. Previous interventions at least pretended to follow a process. Build a coalition, get UN authorization if possible, or at least claim you tried. Pass an authorization for use of military force through Congress. Offer democratic rhetoric about freedom and liberation. Install a friendly puppet government that maintains the fiction of sovereignty. Then quietly extract resources through contracts and influence. Trump's approach is different. No coalition, no UN, no congressional authorization, no democratic rhetoric, no puppet government maintaining sovereignty. Just, we're running it, we're taking the oil, our companies profit, and if you resist, we'll hurt you worse than we hurt Maduro. It's the same imperialism, but with all the pretense stripped away. And that's actually more dangerous, because once you stop even pretending that law matters, that democracy matters, that sovereignty matters, you've normalized pure power politics. You've made it acceptable to just take what you want because you can. Let me give you a specific example of how this is playing out. Edmundo González Urrutia is the Venezuelan opposition leader who ran against Maduro in the July 2024 election. The United States officially recognized González as the legitimate winner of that election. He's currently in exile. By any logic, if this operation were actually about restoring democracy to Venezuela, Trump would install González immediately, return him to Caracas, transfer power. Let Venezuelans govern themselves under their legitimately elected leader. Trump hasn't done that. In fact, Trump said on Saturday, quote, "There is nobody to take over," end quote. But there is somebody. His name is Edmundo Gonzalez, and the US government officially recognized him as Venezuela's legitimate president. Trump is ignoring him. Why? Because installing Gonzalez would mean ceding power to Venezuelans. It would mean the US doesn't control the government. It would mean American companies have to negotiate for oil access rather than just seizing it. When Trump says there's nobody to take over, he doesn't mean nobody exists. He means nobody he wants to give power to. He means I'm keeping control. This reveals what's actually happening. This isn't about Venezuelan democracy. It's about American control. It's about ensuring that whoever governs Venezuela does exactly what US corporate interests want. And Trump has decided the most efficient way to ensure that is to not transfer power at all. Just run it directly. This fits the classic definition of colonial rule. It's not a metaphor. It's not an exaggeration. When a foreign power invades your country, removes your government, installs its own officials to govern, seizes your natural resources, and threatens anyone who resists with military violence, that matches the historical pattern of colonialism. That is what the British did in India, what the French did in Algeria, what the United States did in the Philippines after 1898. The difference is that colonial powers used to at least pretend they were civilizing the savages, or spreading Christianity, or modernizing backwards nations. Trump doesn't bother with the pretense. He just says, "We're seizing the oil. Our companies will make money. Do what we say." Now let's talk about who benefits from this and who pays the cost, because the economics are important. American oil companies benefit. Chevron is already operating in Venezuela under a Treasury Department waiver. They'll expand. ExxonMobil will regain access and resolve long-standing disputes over seized assets. ConocoPhillips may recover property that was nationalized. Other companies will position for contracts in what Trump calls rebuilding the gutted industry. These are private corporations. They're not government entities. They're profit-seeking businesses accountable to shareholders. And the US military is now providing security for their operations in Venezuela. Think about that structure. American taxpayers fund the military operation. We pay for the Delta Force mission that captured Maduro. We're paying for the ongoing troop presence. We'll pay for the bases, the logistics, the security operations that protect oil infrastructure. That's our tax dollars. The profits go to Chevron, ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips, and whatever other companies get contracts. Those profits go to shareholders. The costs are socialized. The benefits are privatized. This is corporate welfare at the scale of empire. The military functions as security guards for corporate extraction operations, and taxpayers foot the bill while corporations reap the profits. Trump personally may benefit too. Which companies get contracts? Who negotiates the terms? Are there kickbacks to Trump Organization properties? Will people who invest in Trump's cryptocurrency, that $Trump coin he launched, get special access to oil deals? We know from previous reporting that foreign nationals who bought into Trump's crypto got access to him at Mar-a-Lago galas. Is Venezuela oil access another commodity for sale? We don't know the answers yet, but the incentive structure is clear. Trump controls military force. Trump's administration determines which companies get contracts. Trump has a history of mixing personal business with presidential power. The opportunity for corruption here is enormous, and presidential immunity, according to the Supreme Court, protects official acts. If Trump decides that choosing which companies get Venezuelan oil contracts is an official act, who's going to stop him? Meanwhile, Venezuelan people lose their sovereignty. Foreign troops are stationed on their soil. Foreign officials govern them. Their oil wealth gets extracted by foreign corporations. They had no say in this. The opposition leader they voted for has been sidelined. They're subjects of occupation. not citizens of a democracy. And American taxpayers fund the whole thing while getting none of the benefits. We pay for the war. We pay for the occupation. We pay for the security. The profits go to corporations, not us. This is how kleptocracy works. Public power gets used for private enrichment. The costs get dumped on the public. The benefits flow to a small group of connected insiders. Let me address the defenses you're going to hear, because they're predictable. First, Maduro was a narco-terrorist dictator who deserved to be removed. Maybe. Probably. In fact, Maduro ran Venezuela into the ground, presided over economic collapse, and has been under indictment for drug trafficking since 2020. Removing him might be good for Venezuela, but that doesn't make the invasion legal. It doesn't justify seizing Venezuela's oil. It doesn't authorize U.S. direct rule. Two things can be true. Maduro is bad, and what Trump is doing is also bad. This isn't about defending Maduro. It's about opposing American imperialism. Second, someone has to govern. There's a power vacuum. Except there isn't. Edmundo Gonzalez exists. The Venezuelan military exists. The National Assembly exists. When Trump says nobody can take over, he's lying. What he means is, nobody I want to cede power to. He's creating the power vacuum by refusing to transfer power to the legitimate opposition leader and using that vacuum to justify indefinite U.S. governance. Third, oil revenue will help Venezuela rebuild. Will it? Trump said our companies will make money, not Venezuelan companies, not the Venezuelan people. Our companies, with U.S. troops providing security for corporate extraction, with American officials running the government. The money is going to flow to Chevron, ExxonMobil, and whoever else gets contracts. Some portion might go to rebuilding Venezuelan infrastructure, but only as much as is necessary to keep the oil flowing. This isn't humanitarian aid. It's resource extraction with a thin veneer of development assistance. Fourth, Democrats would do the same thing. Actually, they wouldn't, at least not this openly. Obama in Libya had UN Security Council authorization. Clinton in Kosovo had NATO coalition backing. Both operations had significant international support and humanitarian justifications that were at least debated seriously. Neither president said, "We're seizing the oil and our companies will make money." Trump is being explicit about resource extraction as the motive. That's new. Imperialism isn't new, but the honesty about it is. And that distinction matters because once you normalize saying the quiet part out loud, once you stop pretending that law and democracy matter, you've crossed a line that's hard to walk back. Fifth, he's protecting American interests. What interests? Corporate profits aren't national security. Venezuela didn't attack us. They posed no imminent threat. If controlling the world's oil reserves counts as protecting American interests, then any country can invade anywhere for resources and call it national security. That's not a legal standard. That's just imperialism with extra steps. Here's what I need you to understand about why this matters. When a president can invade a sovereign nation without congressional authorization, install American officials to govern, seize natural resources for corporate profit, threaten remaining officials with military violence, and face no consequences, that president is no longer bound by law. That president operates as an autocrat. The Supreme Court ruled last summer that presidents have presumptive immunity for official acts and absolute immunity for core constitutional powers. Trump is testing how far that immunity extends. He's learned that he can violate the War Powers Act with ongoing boat strikes in the Red Sea and face no consequences. Now he's invaded Venezuela, announced indefinite occupation, and explicitly stated resource extraction as policy. And so far, nothing has stopped him. This is how authoritarianism spreads, not all at once, incrementally. Each violation that goes unchecked becomes precedent for the next violation. Trump ignores War Powers Act for boat strikes. Nothing happens. So he invades Venezuela without authorization. If nothing happens again, what's next? Does he invade another country? Does he start using military force domestically? Where is the line? And who enforces it? Congress has the sole power to declare war. That's in the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8. Trump has now conducted 2 military operations without congressional authorization, the boat strikes and the Venezuela invasion. He hasn't even pretended to seek approval. He just did it. That's a constitutional crisis. And if Congress doesn't act, if they don't pass a war powers resolution, if they don't impeach, if they don't use their power to check executive overreach, then the Constitution's checks and balances have failed. The international implications are equally serious. The UN Charter prohibits the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. The only exceptions are self-defense or Security Council authorization. Trump has neither. Legal scholars are unequivocal. This is a blatant violation of international law. The UN Secretary General said this sets a dangerous precedent and that the rules of international law have not been respected. If the United States can invade Venezuela to seize oil, why can't China invade Taiwan? Why can't Russia invade Ukraine? Oh, wait, Russia did invade Ukraine, and we condemned it as illegal aggression. What's the difference? The US is bigger and stronger? That's not a legal principle. That's might makes right. That's the law of the jungle. When international law breaks down, when powerful countries just do whatever they want because they can, the result is war. Constant war. Because there's no framework for resolving disputes, no agreed upon rules, no consequences for aggression, just power. And whoever has the most power at any given moment does what they want until someone with more power stops them. That's not a world any of us should want to live in. Not Americans, not Venezuelans, not anyone. Because in a world where law doesn't matter and power is the only metric, nobody is safe except whoever happens to be the strongest right now. And that won't be the same country forever. So, what should you watch for? In the short term, Congress returns Tuesday. Does anyone introduce a war powers resolution? Does anyone move forward with impeachment proceedings, either for the Venezuela invasion or for Pam Bondi's ongoing violation of the Epstein Files statute? Or does Venezuela crowd out domestic accountability entirely? That's another benefit of foreign crisis. It distracts from domestic scandal. Bondi was facing bipartisan impeachment 4 days ago. Now she's prosecuting Maduro. Notice how that works. Watch which oil companies announce they're entering Venezuela. Watch who negotiates those contracts. Watch for any Trump organization connections, any contracts going to Trump donors, any suspicious financial arrangements. The corruption potential here is massive. Watch whether Edmundo Gonzalez ever gets installed as president, or whether Trump just keeps running Venezuela indefinitely. If Gonzalez stays sidelined, that confirms this isn't about Venezuelan democracy. It's about American control. Medium term, watch for insurgency. Iraq taught us that invasion is easy, governing is hard. Maduro has loyalists in the military, in paramilitary groups, among the population. Will they resist US governance? History suggests yes. And if Venezuela turns into a grinding insurgency where US troops are getting killed, the political calculus changes quickly. Watch the costs. How much does ongoing US governance of Venezuela cost per month? Per year? Who's paying for it? That's taxpayer money that could be funding healthcare, education, infrastructure here. Instead, it's funding security for Chevron's oil operations. Long term, watch the precedent. If Trump gets away with this, if there are no consequences, what stops the next president from doing something similar? Or worse, what stops Trump from doing it again somewhere else? And internationally, if the US can ignore international law with impunity, why should any other country respect it? The 2026 midterms are in November. Does this help or hurt Republicans? A rally around the flag effect typically boosts presidential approval during foreign crises. But if Venezuela becomes a quagmire, If Americans see images of casualties and protests and an endless occupation that costs billions, that rally effect turns into an albatross. Iraq was initially popular too. Then it wasn't. Here's the bottom line. Trump is running Venezuela like a protection racket. He's using military force to seize resources for corporate profit. He's threatening officials with violence if they don't comply. He's installing American governors to run a foreign country. He's doing all of this without congressional authorization, without international law justification, without any pretense that this is about democracy or humanitarian intervention. And he's bragging about it. He's saying the quiet part loud. Our companies, seize the oil. We're in charge. Do what we say or face bigger consequences. This is what fascism looks like in foreign policy. Military force, plus corporate merger with the state, plus resource extraction, plus strongman rhetoric, plus threats of violence, plus no democratic accountability. That's not hyperbole. That's the textbook definition of authoritarian imperialism. Trump believes he can do this because presidential immunity protects him. He believes power is the only metric that matters. He believes saying it openly makes him look strong, not corrupt. And unless Congress acts, unless voters demand accountability, unless there are consequences for these actions, he's right. He can do this. He is doing this. And he'll keep doing it, here and abroad, until something stops him. The question is whether anything will. Maduro appears in court today. That's theater. The real story is that Trump has announced indefinite U.S. governance of Venezuela, made explicit resource extraction the stated policy, and threatened anyone who resists with military violence. That's not regime change. That's not even imperialism with a humanitarian mask. That's warlord governance at the national level. And the President of the United States is bragging about running a protection racket. Pay attention to what he's saying. Believe him when he tells you who he is. Thanks for spending a few minutes digging into this with me. If you want more grounded, progressive commentary without the outrage bait, subscribe and stick around. Every time you watch, share, and engage, it helps build a community that believes democracy is worth understanding and defending. I'll see you in the next video.